Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. I got another Master Duel video for you, coming at you with a tier list. Definitely need to do one of these following the latest selection pack, as MITSURUGI and Orchest coming into the game has shaken up the meta quite a bit. Of course, it's mostly MITSURUGI, but definitely don't underestimate Orchest either. It's really just been quite a different meta since the last time we did one of these. So, as always, definitely feel free to let me know what you think in the comments below. Also, if you're interested in checking out content early, make sure to join as a YouTube member, as you will get to see all the YouTube videos when they are uploaded as opposed to when they go live. I typically upload videos at least a day or two early, but sometimes up to a week as well. Also, if you're looking for exclusive content and or coaching options, head over to patreon.com/hexlex. And all the content, all the videos there is exclusive to Patreon. You can't get it anywhere else. So definitely feel free to check those out. Joining either also gets your name in the credits and is a great way to support the channel. But enough of the opening blurb. Let's get right on into this tier list here. So starting off with Blue Eyes. Blue Eyes did actually get some new support in this pack in the form of Ancient Fairy Life Dragon, which is a great way to help it OTK. But not quite the level of power that a lot of other decks got from playing MITSURUGI, which Blue Eyes doesn't typically. I think Blue Eyes is still going to be a really solid tier 2 deck going into this meta. It's funny how it can do the same game plan of Double Spirit Dragon, and that's like still good enough to keep up. But I think you will start to notice it fall off a little bit here in terms of overall power level compared to like what everything else is doing. But I still think I got to call Blue Eyes at least tier 2. All right. These aren't in any particular order, by the way, but the first MITSURUGI deck that is on here is going to be MITSURUGI Fiendsmith. So, to me, this plays most similarly to, like, pure MITSURUGI. The Fiendsmith engine, basically, it's a difference of, like, do you go into Gallant Granite, search Nibiru in the pure version, or you can use those bodies to go into Moon of Closed Heavens. Sometimes the extenders you can do both, but I'm going to put this in tier 2. Do I want to put it higher than Blue Eyes? I don't think I do. I think these are actually pretty close, though. Like, MITSURUGI just doing its own thing, or just combined with a, smaller engine like Fiendsmith, definitely has a lot more legs than something like Fiendsmith would if you tried to play that pure. I'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about pure MITSURUGI, but I think the overall power level of MITSURUGI, even by itself, is somewhere in tier 2. I'll put Blue Eyes a little bit higher than the Fiendsmith variant for now, but I might, if I change my mind on that, I'll just switch them around. Pearly. So Pearly recently got Delicious Memory back up to 3, that's why I wanted to include it here. Up until this point, I would have called Pearly a rogue deck. Pearly can also play a few different variants that I haven't, separately listed out here, because I think they're all about roughly the same power level. But Fiendsmith Pearly is definitely a thing. You could even do MITSURUGI Pearly with Diviner. You could go normal summon Diviner, search Habakiri, activate Habakiri, then you contribute Diviner, and that'll let you get level 1 fairies, which I think that Pearlies are. That should work if I remember right. But I'm going to put Pearly towards the top of Rogue for now. I could see a world where this is tier 3, though. And I think a lot of the reason why, I don't know. I think this might be a little bit overlooked. I mean, it's really easy to overlook a lot of other recent, ban lists or other changes with MITSURUGI around, which is definitely the most impactful. But I think there is a world where Pearly and its variants are like maybe mid to lower tier 3. And I might end up putting it there later, but I'm going to put it in Rogue for now. Crystron I'll put in tier 3 because even though we're in a MITSURUGI meta, I think Crystron is still a fairly powerful deck. And of course, with people no longer maining Lancia nearly as much as they used to, Crystron definitely gets a nice power boost from that. K9, whenever that comes out, will be a very significant buff for Crystron, and at that point, I think it'll go back up to tier 2. For the time being, I'm going to keep Crystron in tier 3, though, which I think is also where I'm going to put Yubel. Although I think Yubel will probably end up being more towards the bottom of tier 3. Yeah, I'll leave it here for now. I think that Yubel, obviously it did get the Gates, as well as the Nightmare Throne, and of course the Dark Beckoning Beast all back up to 3, which is a solid consistency buff, but unfortunately Yubel can't really make much use of MITSURUGI because of the Fiend blocks. Of course you can still play Fiendsmith, which is still quite good, but, we're definitely noticing a very significant shift of the power level of the overall meta as MITSURUGI has entered. Centurion I'm also going to put in tier 3. I think I'm roughly about the same power level as Yubel. You could do this either way. But I did actually see someone in the Discord server, Lux, I think it was. Hopefully I got the name right. I was talking about MITSURUGI Centurion, so that's fun. But yeah, no, I definitely think Centurion still has quite a bit of legs in this format. Like Ubel, even if it's not, you know, able to keep up quite as much, it's still a very solid deck. Sky Striker, I'm gonna put that in Rogue tier, just because we haven't received the new support yet, and it's still just kind of running off of what it usually does, you know, the same Sky Striker core of being able to search and, you know, go through your Link 1 bodies, but also your power spells, like your going second stuff and your triple tactics thrust and everything. There's always gonna be, like, I think that Sky Striker, as it currently is, because of its ability to utilize a bunch of really good board breakers and a thrust for specific outs, is kind of always going to have this nebulous spot of upper to middle rogue for its ability to counter any particular meta and being able to shift like that. But, you know, definitely once the new support comes out, then it's going to get quite a bit better, and it'll be, like, you know, debatably tier 2 going on tier 1. But for the time being, I'll leave it upper rogue. I'm going to put Kashira below that because Kashira just continues to fall off. I've been saying this for like over a year and a half at this point, but yeah, I mean, Arise Heart plus Era is like kind of scary, I guess, but fails to like pretty much every single board breaker. It doesn't really have outs to any given hand trap, and at the end of the day, it's annoying, but it's not really strong. Kashira has become exactly that. It is a nuisance, but it is not a, like, huge problem or anything. There is an argument, I guess, to banning Arise Heart so that way Fenrir and Unicorn can come to 3, and then you can utilize Kashira as more of an engine. I honestly think that you could put Fenrir to 2 now and Unicorn to 3, and it would be fine, while still leaving Arise Heart unbanned. Like, I don't think that Kashira would become a super significant meta threat by giving the deck one more copy each of Unicorn and Fenrir back. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it towards like middle lower rogue. Ignister, I think is a very, very solid deck. Of course, it got support in the last expansion, which was kind of overshadowed by the fact that Malice could use it very well, but definitely don't ignore the fact that Ignister got a huge power buff from that. Doesn't even need the field spell to pop off anymore. I still think it is a rogue power level deck, but definitely upper rogue for sure. So this is pure Orcust. I do have other Orcust variants here. Somewhere, yeah, there's Fiendsmith and MITSURUGI somewhere, yeah, right here as well. So this Galatea Eye portrait just represents pure Orcust by itself. Pure Orcust by itself, I think, is a like tier 3 power level deck. This is the line that I showed off at the beginning of my combo guide where, you know, we ended on an Appaloosa that we were able to buff, right? It's the line that I used the Lib and World Legacy Succession, which is very optional, but that's a line I found on Road to the King and I really, really liked it. So the other Orcust variants are going to get placed higher, don't worry. But pure Orcust without any other engine, I do still think is a very solid tier 3 deck. I might even put it a little bit above Crystron. I think it's like debatable. I think they're roughly the same power level, but yeah, no, Galatea Eye and Indil Girsu, just 2 cards added to the extra deck, hugely buffs the ceiling of what Orcust is capable of. That said, I really think that Orcust's true ceiling does lie in being used with other engines, and that's why I'm going to place those higher, end up placing those higher on the tier list here. But Regenesis, I think I'm actually going to put this towards the bottom, no, maybe upper rogue. Yeah, upper rogue feels like a good spot for it. Regenesis is kind of a cool, like, anti-meta deck right now, where it does use Floodgates sometimes, but not all the time, and I would hesitate to just straight up call it stun. The same way I would kind of hesitate to call Exodia straight up stun. Like, yeah, it utilizes Floodgates sometimes, but it also is very much doing its own thing, and so is Regenesis. The resource loop in Regenesis, if you can get it going, is actually very rough to deal with. So I think the thing the deck struggles with is mostly like, can you stop your opponent's initial push? If you can stop your opponent's initial push, be it with hand traps or floodgates or whatever else, and then get your Regenesis resource loop going, it is very hard for your opponent to recover. But of course, if your opponent establishes their initial combo, their initial board, then it's kind of rough for Regenesis to be able to push through that. But I've seen this deck around quite a bit, and I'm going to put it towards the top of Rogue. Again, you could even call it like lower tier 3, and I wouldn't even super argue against that. but I'll put it down here for now. Okay, so pure Ryzeal. This is without any other engines. No MITSURUGI, no Magistus either. I'm gonna put that, I think, in tier 1. I don't know. Part of me wants to put it at the top of tier 2, but I'm going to leave it tier 1 for now. I'll say for this tier list, I think there might be more decks in tier 1 than potentially ever before. But even without any assistance, you know, Ryzeal is still Ryzeal. It's still able to do all of the very powerful stuff it was doing before. And if you're not playing any other engines, then you have a lot more room for hand traps and anti-meta techs. So there is an argument to even play Ryzeal without MITSURUGI. That said, I do think it is going to be weaker than without MITSURUGI. I guess at that point I might as well just do this right now, right? I don't think it's any surprise to say that MITSURUGI Ryzeal is the best deck in the meta right now. The MITSURUGI engine not only raises the number of starters that Ryzeal has, but also, of course, will raise the end board, the power level of it, significantly as well. It's like, there's basically, again, unless you want to play more hand traps or anti-meta techs in the pure deck, you could make an argument there's really not much reason not to play MITSURUGI and Ryzeal. You can still do exactly all the same stuff combo-wise that pure does, plus more, right? It's always just going to be more. So, that said, I don't think pure Ryzeal is bad. It's definitely still a tier 1 deck, but yeah, MITSURUGI, to probably nobody's surprise, I think is the best deck in the room right now. MITSURUGI Ryzeal, that is. Memento, a deck that you already didn't see around too much, despite it being quite solid, mostly because of how complex it can be, and of course, with all of the MITSURUGI hype, you're starting to see even less of it. That said, I think I'm going to put it towards like mid to lower tier 2, because it's still a really, really good deck. It can play decently through Duel and Lockbird, which is, of course, going to be a factor in this meta. It's a little bit hand dependent sometimes, but for the most part, you don't typically struggle with it too much. And same can be said for lane 2. You mostly just don't get your graveyard effects, which sometimes you rely on more than others. But yeah, I think as always, the main thing that stops Memento from being played more is just how complex it is. But it is still a very good. Tier limits, I will definitely be putting in tier 3 because they received a fairly significant power boost in the last set with Gem Knights. Brilliant Fusion being at 3, also just a huge buff for tier limit overall. You could make a solid argument for this being tier 2, but I'm going to leave it here for now. Although I will say, if I'm going to have tier limit being tier 3, then I think I will end up putting Memento down here, because I think there's an argument for these decks being similar power level, maybe like somewhere like that. But yeah, tier limit with 3 Brilliant Fusion with a Gem Knight package is quite good, and is very much a force to be reckoned with in this meta. Sprite is a deck that's very near and dear to me, but I will be objective here and put it in Rogue tier. The one thing I wanted to mention about Sprite in particular is that it plays extremely well into Duel and Lockbird. Like, if you're playing pure Sprite without, like, Fiendsmith or, like, maybe MITSURUGI, I haven't built MITSURUGI Sprite yet, but don't worry, the gears in my head are turning. But the thing about Sprite when played pure is two things actually that poise it pretty well into the current meta. For one, it plays very well under Duel and Lockbird. Like I said, Blue and Jet are literally your only 2 searches, and if you go Blue search Jet and they droll you, all you miss out on is Sprite starter, which is just 1 body. It's a little annoying, like yeah, it's like you would like to have Red or Carrot, but you can still full combo and set up negates and other interactions without having access to that. And the other thing that makes pure Sprite particularly good in this meta is Impulse. You get to play Impulse, which is really, really good against both MITSURUGI and Malice. Again, if you're playing Fiendsmith, then you can't really play that, but if I do manage to cook up a MITSURUGI Sprite build, that would in theory still be able to play Impulse. So I think the ability to play not only arguably one of the strongest hand traps in the current meta, but also playing through one of the strongest hand traps in the meta does leave Sprite uniquely poised pretty well in this meta. Of course, you know, it does still suffer from a lack of overall power level compared to a lot of the other stuff here. Alright, Stun, and it continues to be a fairly weak deck in the grand scheme of things. With all the floodgate limitations. I know a lot of people like to see a lot of the limited floodgates banned, and I don't even have an argument against that. as I don't particularly enjoy playing into those cards myself. I guess the main argument for Stun's existence would be a variety of playstyle, which I do think overall tends to be a pretty good thing. But, you know, I'm certainly not sad that Stun is kind of at the bottom of Rogue right now. And that's not even just me, like, coping with, I think. It really does, you really struggle, right? Like, at this point, there's kind of an argument of why would you play, like, a pure Stun deck when you could just play Regenesis with maybe a couple of Floodgates and do the same kind of strategy, but better, you know? So, yeah, I'll leave it down here for now. I think Voiceless continues to be a very solid deck in this meta that I'll put in tier 2. I think Voiceless and Mitsurugi... I meant to say Memento. Voiceless and Memento are kind of similar in that, well, I guess mainly the barrier for Voiceless that stops it, the barrier, that stops it from, you know, getting more play is just how expensive it is, right? Whereas Memento, I think, is more of an issue of how complex it is. But, you know, despite the fact that very few people play it relative to other decks, I do still think that Voiceless is a very strong deck. And of course, it can make use of Mitsurugi. It is a ritual deck, so yeah, definitely do not sleep on this deck. It is quite good. Mitsurugi Orchest. Ooh, where am I gonna put this one? Part of me wants to put it in tier 1. Another part of me wants to put it at the top of tier 2. I think I'm gonna leave it at the top of tier 2 for now, but you could make an argument for this being in tier 1, and I might even change my mind on that later. We'll see how things end up panning out. This is a lot stronger than I thought it was gonna be. Orchest in general is a lot stronger than I thought it was gonna be. Going into a meta with Mitsurugi. Of course, I didn't even realize at first that, like, oh duh, you can just play Mitsurugi in Orchest. And the cool thing is you can still play Impulse in that deck too. But yeah, it's not even just, you know, the Mitsurugi adding the consistency and the Murakumo to the end board. Of course, with the Orchest stuff as well, the Enlil Girsu, plus being able to go babble and set up a million bodies, including a ding to send stuff, IP to go into Appaloosa if you haven't Dark Locked yet, or an SP even if you have. Like, it's just so strong. And of course, in Master Duel, we have Nightmare Mermaid, which makes it even more consistent. In paper play, if you want to bridge from Mitsurugi to Orchest, you have to go into Zombie Vamp and go gambling with your mills. But in Master Duel, we can go into Nightmare Mermaid, which is a guaranteed bridge from Mitsurugi into your Orchest stuff to end on the exact same inboard you would if you just opened Girsu. It's so good. Like, yeah, I really want to put it up here. I might leave it here for now. We'll see. We'll see. We'll leave it there for the time being. Branded. I'm going to put Branded in tier 2. I think I'll put it more towards the bottom of tier 2 because I will say that I'm kind of starting to notice Branded. I don't want to say it's falling off because it's still an extremely good deck, and the most skilled pilots of it can still do things with Branded that are way beyond debate, right? But that said, you know, the thing is, like, Branded's power level, as far as, like, you know, it doesn't put out a ton of negates, it doesn't make a million board wipes, right? Necessarily. But it's still able to, like, keep up. I think a large part of that was the resource looping, but also now decks are becoming so much more consistent, and a lot of them have natural resource loops built in, like Ryziel Cross, for example, that, you know, that part of Brandon's identity is starting to shine a little bit less as time goes on. You can make an argument for Brandon being better than Voiceless. Yeah, I guess I'll leave it like that for now. Yeah, that's fine. Like, I don't think Brandon's like the bottom of the barrel when it comes to tier 2, but I do think it is starting to slowly, very slowly slide off a little bit. But I want to emphasize the slowly and little bit there. Okay. Gem Knights are definitely going to be a tier 2 deck. Ooh, okay, here's a kind of a big debate. Do I think Gem Knight is better than Mitsurugi? I'll put it here for now, because I think mostly because you're not seeing as much Gem Knight because Mitsurugi is the shiny new toy. But, you know, Gem Knight has a ton of variants, right? That's the huge thing it has going for it. Namely, you can play it going first and Mjolnir lock people, or you could play it going second and OTK people. Or you can mix it with archetypes like Tearlament, I think that's one of Gem Knight's biggest strengths right now, and it is still a really, really good deck. So yeah, I'll put it in the middle of tier 2. MITSURUGI Magistus. I actually have not tried this variant out yet myself, but I have seen some videos on it. I know Shapers of Snatches had a really cool video on it that made me want to try it out. I saw Trishula posting about it on social media as well. Yeah, I'm gonna put this in tier 2. I don't know, see, the thing that kind of makes me want to say this is a little bit weaker than some other MITSURUGI variants is, I guess, mostly my inexperience with that. I need to experience the strength for myself, but it seems a little more susceptible to hand traps. Like I don't know, every MITSURUGI variant is going to be susceptible to Droll, but depending on what you're pairing the deck with, like MITSURUGI Orcus, for example, if you get hit with Droll and you can still have access to your Orcus stuff, you can still set up a ton of bodies, right? And MITSURUGI Ryzeal, depending on what you have access to, you can still go Detonator, pass under Droll and Lockbird, you know? Whereas I feel like, and again, I haven't played the deck yet for myself, so I haven't experienced this, but I feel like MITSURUGI Magistus, like, it doesn't matter if you start with Spento or Habakiri. If you get Drolled, you're just kind of SOL. I mean, you could still do some amount of things, I'm sure, but maybe I'll do that for the time being. Put the Magistus variant higher than the Fiendsmith variant. Yeah, I guess I'll do that for now. Labyrinth. Labyrinth I'll put in tier 3. It is starting to slide off a little bit, kind of like Brandon. It's one of those decks that has a really good resource loop, but as decks are becoming more powerful and also being able to resource loop themselves, that part of its identity is starting to fall off a little bit. D-Barrier, of course, being able to call Ritual does make it quite a bit better than in Malice format, because you can't call links with Dimensional Barrier. That made Labyrinth not quite as good in Malice format in general, but yeah, I still think it's a very good deck overall. Magistus Ryzeal. I mean, if I think that pure Ryzeal is tier 1, then Magistus Ryzeal I think is also tier 1, but yeah, I mean, I think the argument stands there. The thing is, though, I think Magistus Ryzeal, which was actually considered the better variant, is now kind of the weakest one, because it's like, again, the argument to playing pure is that you can play more off-engine, right? More hand traps and stuff, or board breakers if you want to, or anti-meta tech. But it's like, if you're going to play another engine with Ryzeal, at this point, the argument is, why would you not want to do MITSURUGI? I mean, the Magistus variant does different things, right? Like, the Evil Swarm Ouroboros hand ripping is, of course, different than what MITSURUGI sets up, but MITSURUGI also is just starters that are, I don't know, it's more consistent, it's more powerful, and I think if you're going to play another engine with Ryzeal, it should just be MITSURUGI. That said, if you chose to play Magistus Ryzeal, you would still experience a lot of success in this meta, because Ryzeal is still just that good. So this is like one of those decks where, like, yeah, it's in tier 1, but I just don't think you're going to see a ton of it in the current metagame. Fiendsmith Orcus. This one I am going to put in tier 2. This is another variant of a deck that I haven't tried out yet myself, but I'll put it like around the same area as Gem Knight. Yeah, I mean, of course, you could make another argument of, like, if you're going to pair this deck with another engine, why not MITSURUGI? You could go for a 60-card variant and do Fiendsmith plus MITSURUGI plus Orcus, but, you know, of course, the argument here, I think, would be that this wouldn't be nearly as weak to Droll and Lockbird. Like, yeah, Engraver for Tract does get hit by Droll, but otherwise the Fiendsmith engine plays extremely well into Droll and Lockbird. And, of course, Orcus, while also potentially hitting some snags with Droll, generally also plays pretty well into. So here there is a pretty solid argument to playing this non-MITSURUGI variant of a deck. But that said, I do think it is going to be a decent bit weaker than the MITSURUGI variant. So I'm going to put it here for now. The more that time goes on, like, I really do like this deck, but I think I have to put it at the top of tier 2. Like, it's so close. I might even change my mind a little bit later, but anyway. Mathmech, it got a huge power buff from the new Ignister stuff, but I don't think it was enough. I don't know, it's like when I compare Mathmech in my head to a deck like Centurion or Yubel, I feel like it's pretty similar. Like, I want to do this with tier 3. I find myself wanting to do something like that. But at the same time, I'm like, am I coping? Is it just because I like Mathmech a lot? Does it actually belong here at the top of Rogue? I don't know, when I think about Math Effect, maybe the real answer is that Centurion actually does belong towards the top of Rogue as well. Like, I'll drop it, like, right here. I'll do, like, this. Yeah, I'll leave it like that for now. I think that actually ends up looking great. Alright, so here I have Pure MITSURUGI, which I am going to put in tier 2. This is actually, I'm tempted to put it on top, above even like the Magistus and Fiendsmith variant, because I'll say this, surprisingly to me, Pure MITSURUGI has actually so far been my favorite variant to play. Like, it's the most, I guess, quote-unquote boring, but at the same time, you know, ending on the Futsu, I think that's the one, right? The red one with 3,400 defense. Ending on that is way better than it looks, combined with the Photon Lord and the IP. Plus, you have a lot of room for off-engine. I don't know. It's just like it's hard to describe. I didn't expect to like Pure MITSURUGI more than almost any other variant, I think, at this point, but I do. That said, the ceiling of the Magistus variant is just higher. I think the Pure variant is pretty comparable to Fifth. I'll leave it like this. I think they're all like upper to mid tier 2, middle tier 2. Yeah, I'll leave them up here. I think that's... Alright, Malice. In spite of all of the hits that Malice has suffered on the ban list, it's actually still one of the best decks in the meta. Kind of wild, although if you look at the Duelist Cup, you'll know that the decks that were used there for Malice weren't even playing all the starters. Like, a lot of them were only on one Gold Sark anyway, right? Or I think even some weren't playing it at all. Or no, I think it was more of the Underground, right? Some builds were playing 2 or even sometimes already on 1 Underground. Now, that said, your reliance on stuff like Allure or occasionally Cynet mining more than before does, you know, make the deck noticeably weaker. But I do still think it is one of the best decks in the meta. I think one of the things that's really propping it up right now in particular is that people have stopped maining Lancia and Mass and swapped them out for Duel and Lockbird. Because, like, even if Malice is, like, one of the best decks in the room, you know, statistically, you're so much more likely to hit a MITSURUGI variant that, like, Duel and Lockbird has a lot more stocks right now than something like Lancia. But, of course, without Lancia around, Malice has that much fewer things opposing it. And Malice a lot of the time really does not care about Duel and Lockbird at all. So, yeah, I'm gonna leave it in the I think it's definitely a tier 1 deck, and looking at the rest of the tier list here, I do think it ends up being like the second best deck in the room. There is still a part of me that wants to bring Orcust back up here and maybe even do something like that. I'll do this for now. Tenpai. I'll put Tenpai at the top of tier 3. Because, like, at this point, if you're gonna play a Going Second deck, I feel like Going Second Gem Knight is, like, kind of on par power level with Tenpai. But again, the reason Gem Knight is higher on the tier list is because you can play the really good Going First variant as well. But Tenpai's game plan is not only very predictable at this point, but it's honestly kind of compared to what you could be doing in this meta. Even, again, compared to other Going Second decks, you could argue it's a little bit weak. And finally, we have Atlantean, which I am going to pretty firmly put, I think, in tier 3. I think even, I'm going to put it kind of low down, mostly because of how prevalent Duel and Lockbird is in this meta, and how weak the deck is to that card. I don't know. If I'm going to do that, I'll put Crystron, I think, further down. Maybe even like that. I'll bring Memento down a little bit. No, I'll leave it up here. That's fine. Okay, yeah, I'm actually fine with what I have right here with this tier list. I'm looking at it, and I think this is a pretty good spot to leave off on. But let me know what you think as well in the comments below. Either way, thanks for watching. Super duper appreciate you. And honestly, you know, looking at this tier list here, like, yeah, there's a lot of MITSURUGI, and I could understand people getting tired of that in particular, but there's a lot more variety in this meta as far as, like, what's good and what's viable and what people are on. So I think that's a cool thing. I've been having a ton of fun playing in this meta and making videos for it. And I really like the spot that we're in right now. So anyway, that's all I got for you. Let us move on to our outro. Hey everybody, Hexlex here. Thank you so very much for watching all the way to the very end of the video, which by the way is one of the best ways to support the channel. Speaking of supporting the channel, take a look at the names on screen. These are folks who have been so generous as to either join as a YouTube member or subscribe over on patreon.com/Hexlex to support. There's also perks for doing so. If you would like to see YouTube videos early, as well as some exclusive videos that get uploaded to YouTube, but for one reason or another I decide not to publish, definitely go ahead and hit that join button to see content early, as well as some exclusive content. If you're looking for more exclusive content, over on patreon.com, I upload exclusive videos that are not posted on YouTube just about every single day. Whether you choose to subscribe over on Patreon, join as a YouTube member, or simply continue to watch, your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so very much. But for now, this is Hexlex. I am signing out, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.